Welcome to this biographical sleep story about Nikola Tesla, one of history's most brilliant and enigmatic inventors. Tonight we journey through the extraordinary life of a man who dared to imagine a world powered by invisible forces, who saw electricity not as a commodity to be controlled, but as a gift to be freely shared with all humanity. Born in a remote village during a violent thunderstorm, Tesla seemed destined from his first breath to harness the power of lightning itself. He became not just an inventor of remarkable devices, but a visionary who glimpsed our modern world decades before it arrived. His mind operated on a plane few could understand, visualizing entire machines in perfect detail, conducting experiments in the theater of his imagination before ever touching a tool. As you settle into comfort and prepare for rest, let this story of genius and struggle, triumph and heartbreak carry you through the night. We'll explore Tesla's journey from a small Serbian village to the heights of American innovation, through battles with titans of industry, through moments of world-changing discovery and devastating loss. This is a story about reaching for the impossible, about the price of being too far ahead of your time, and about a spirit that refused to compromise its vision even when the world turned away. Chapter 1. Lightning and Prophecy. The night of July 9, 1856, was alive with fury. In the small village of Smiljan, nestled in the mountainous region of what is now Croatia, but was then part of the Austrian Empire, a summer storm of extraordinary violence swept across the landscape. Lightning tore through the darkness, thunder shook the modest Serbian Orthodox parsonage, and in the midst of this elemental chaos, Nikola Tesla gave birth to her fourth child, a son. The midwife, witnessing the storm's intensity at the moment of birth, declared the child a child of darkness, a bad omen. But Tesla's mother, exhausted yet defiant, whispered, "No, he will be a child of light." This exchange, whether embellished by later retellings or not, would prove remarkably prophetic. The boy they named Nikola would indeed spend his life chasing light, harnessing it, transforming it, and ultimately attempting to share it freely with the entire world. Nikola's father, Milutin Tesla, was an Orthodox priest and writer, a man of letters who had hoped his son would follow him into the church. His mother, Duka, though lacking formal education, possessed an extraordinary inventive mind. She created mechanical appliances and tools to ease household labor, working by candlelight after her daily duties were complete. Young Nikola would watch his mother's clever hands, seeing in her practical creativity the first sparks of his own inventive genius. The Tesla household was one of modest means but rich in intellectual stimulation. Nikola was the fourth of 5 children, and tragedy marked the family early. His older brother Dane, by all accounts a brilliant child, died in a riding accident when Nikola was just 5 years old. This loss would haunt Tesla throughout his life, creating in him a complex mixture of survivor's guilt and driving ambition, as if he needed to achieve enough for 2 brothers. From his earliest years, Nikola displayed unusual capabilities. His memory was extraordinary, almost eidetic. He could visualize objects and inventions in his mind with such perfect clarity that he claimed he could not distinguish his mental images from reality. This gift, which he would later call his picture thinking, became both his greatest asset and, at times, a source of torment, as unwanted visions would flood his mind unbidden. The natural world of his childhood surroundings captivated young Tesla. He spent hours by the rushing streams, watching water flow over rocks, pondering the power contained in moving liquid. He observed the mechanical water wheels in local mills with intense fascination. already beginning to see the world through the lens of energy, motion, and force. One childhood memory would stay with him forever, stroking his cat macaque in the dark and seeing sparks of static electricity leap from the animal's fur. "What is this?" he asked his father. "That is electricity," came the reply. The word would become his life's obsession. At school, Nikola's abilities astonished his teachers. He could perform complex mathematical calculations in his head with such speed that his instructors suspected him of cheating. When asked to prove his work, he would explain his mental process, revealing a mind that could manipulate numbers and formulas as easily as most children stacked blocks. Yet this gift isolated him as much as it elevated him. His classmates found him strange, too intense, too different. Tesla's imagination was matched by an intense curiosity that sometimes led him into danger. He once climbed the roof of a barn, convinced he could fly if he held an umbrella, and jumped. The resulting fall left him bedridden for weeks, but even this painful lesson couldn't dampen his willingness to test his theories through direct experiment. His mind refused to accept limitations without investigation. As he grew older, Nikola became aware of the world beyond Smiljan. His father's books opened windows to distant lands and ideas. He read voraciously, consuming everything from Serbian epic poetry to descriptions of new scientific discoveries filtering in from Western Europe and America. He learned German and later mastered French, Italian, and English, understanding that the language of innovation was international. His father's expectations weighed heavily on him. Milutin Tesla, while proud of his son's intellect, remained determined that Nikola should enter the priesthood. This created a tension in the boy's heart. He loved and respected his father deeply, but the call he felt was not toward spiritual ministry, but toward understanding the physical forces that governed the universe. How could he honor his father while remaining true to his own calling? The question became critical when Tesla completed his basic schooling. His father enrolled him in the higher real gymnasium in Karlovac, where Nikola excelled in mathematics and physics. His teachers recognized extraordinary talent and encouraged him toward engineering studies, but Milutin remained unmoved. The church awaited his son, and that was final. Then fate intervened in a terrible way. Nikola contracted cholera shortly after returning home from Karlovac. The disease ravaged his body for 9 months. He lay bedridden, wasting away, hovering between life and death. The doctors gave up hope. In his delirium, Tesla had visions of machines, of forces in motion, of coils and currents. And in his most lucid moments, he extracted from his father a promise that would change everything. "If I get well," Nikola whispered to his father at his bedside, "will you let me study engineering?" Milutin Tesla, faced with losing his son entirely, made a choice born of love. "You will go to the best technical institution in the world," he promised. It was the gift of freedom, given at the very edge of death. And Nikola, armed now with purpose and permission, began his slow recovery. To rebuild his strength after the illness, Tesla spent time in the mountains, breathing fresh air, walking in nature, and allowing his body to heal while his mind continued its restless work. During this convalescence, he read Mark Twain's works and became a lifelong admirer of the American humorist. He also deepened his understanding of the natural sciences, preparing himself for the formal education that now lay ahead. As he regained his health, the young man who had nearly died felt reborn into a life of purpose. The priesthood was behind him. His father's blessing had freed him to pursue his true calling. Ahead lay institutions of learning, laboratories, and the chance to transform his visions into reality. The child born in lightning, who had survived illness and accident, was ready to become the man who would electrify the world. Chapter 2: Education and Awakening. In 1875, at 19 years old, Nikola Tesla entered the Austrian Polytechnic School in Graz, one of the most prestigious technical institutions in Europe. He arrived with fierce determination and the weight of his father's expectations. This was his chance to prove that the promise extracted from a deathbed had been worth keeping. He would not waste it. Tesla threw himself into his studies with an intensity that alarmed even his professors. He worked from 3 in the morning until 11 at night, driven by a perfectionism that bordered on obsession. He studied physics, mathematics, and mechanical engineering, absorbing knowledge with the same voracious appetite he had shown as a child. His classmates marveled at his stamina and his ability to master complex material that left others struggling. During his second year at Graz, Tesla witnessed a demonstration that would alter the course of his life. Professor Coil, his physics instructor, showed the class a newly arrived Gram dynamo, a direct current electrical generator. When the device was running, it sparked and crackled, its brushes and commutator creating a display of electrical discharge that most in the room saw as simply the normal operation of such machines. But Tesla saw waste. He saw inefficiency, and in a moment of youthful boldness, he suggested to Professor Coil that the machine would work better without the commutator and brushes altogether. The professor's response was swift and crushing. He lectured Tesla in front of the entire class, explaining in condescending detail why alternating current could never be harnessed for useful work, why the commutator was essential, why Tesla's suggestion was impossible. The other students laughed at the presumptuous young Serb. But the humiliation ignited something in Tesla rather than extinguishing it. If the professor was wrong, if there was a way to make alternating current work efficiently, it would represent a revolution in electrical power. The problem embedded itself in his mind like a splinter. For hours, days, weeks, he pondered it. How could you make a motor run on alternating current without the mechanical complexity of commutators and brushes? His visualization abilities went into overdrive, imagining configurations, testing them mentally, discarding failures, and trying again. The obsession came at a cost. Tesla's health, never robust after his bout with cholera, began to suffer under the strain of his relentless work schedule. He developed nervous symptoms, acute sensitivity to sound and light, and periods where his senses became so heightened that the tick of a watch 3 rooms away sounded like hammer blows. These afflictions would plague him to varying degrees for the rest of his life. His academic performance, despite his tremendous capacity for work, became erratic. In his first year, he had been an exemplary student, but by his 3rd year, he had become addicted to gambling, staying up all night at card games, losing money his family could ill afford. He managed to win back his losses eventually, but the experience left him shaken and ashamed. He also began to neglect some of his formal coursework, pursuing his own investigations into alternating current while letting required assignments slide. When the time came for his final examinations, Tesla found himself unprepared. He left Graz without completing his degree, a failure that would haunt him even as his later achievements far surpassed anything a diploma could represent. He told his family nothing of this, allowing them to believe he was still pursuing his studies. The deception weighed on him, adding another layer to the complex burden he carried. Tesla spent the next period of his life in a kind of limbo, moving from place to place, taking temporary jobs, and wrestling with his demons. He worked briefly as a draftsman in Maribor, living in modest circumstances, still hiding his academic failure from his family. When his father discovered the truth, the disappointment was crushing. Milutin Tesla had sacrificed his own dreams for his son, and this was the result. In 1879, Milutin Tesla died suddenly, and Nikola was devastated. The reconciliation he had hoped for would never come. He had disappointed his father at the end. The grief drove him deeper into his work as an escape from pain. He enrolled at Charles Ferdinand University in Prague, studying philosophy and physics, but his heart wasn't in formal education anymore. He had become a lone researcher, following paths that interested him regardless of whether they led to degrees or approval. During this period, Tesla's health problems intensified. The heightened sensory sensitivity became extreme at times. A carriage passing on the street could cause physical pain. The light of a candle in a dark room seemed like a blazing sun, and the visions in his mind became more vivid and sometimes more troubling. He would see flashes of light, geometric patterns, entire scenes that would appear before his eyes unbidden. He wondered if he was going mad. Yet he also recognized that this unusual mental state gave him unique abilities. When he closed his eyes and imagined a machine, he could see it in 3 dimensions, rotating it, examining every part, testing it mentally. He could make modifications to the design in his imagination and observe how those changes affected the machine's operation. It was as if he had a fully equipped laboratory inside his head. In 1880, Tesla secured a position with the Central Telegraph Office in Budapest, which was under construction as part of a new telephone system. The work was stimulating, offering practical experience with electromagnetic devices. He made improvements to the equipment and impressed his supervisors with his technical acumen and innovative solutions to problems. Finally, he was applying his knowledge in the real world, seeing his ideas take physical form. But the alternating current motor still eluded him. For 6 years since that humiliating moment in Professor Poschel's class, the problem had pursued him through cities and jobs, through illness and grief. He could not solve it, but he could not abandon it either. It had become more than a technical challenge. It was a test of his worth, proof that he belonged among the world's great inventors. Then, in February 1882, on an evening walk through a Budapest park, the answer came. Tesla was reciting passages from Goethe's Faust, a work he had memorized and loved, walking with a friend as the sun set. He reached the lines. The glow retreats, done is the day of toil. It yonder hastes, new fields of life exploring. And in that moment, as if the words themselves were a key turning in a lock, his mind assembled the solution in a flash of insight. He saw it completely, a rotating magnetic field, not a motor with a commutator and brushes, but a motor that used multiple phases of alternating current to create a magnetic field that rotated continuously. The conductor wouldn't have to move through a stationary field. The field itself would rotate, dragging the conductor along with it. It was elegant. It was simple. It was revolutionary. Tesla stopped walking. His friend asked what was wrong, but Tesla barely heard him. He was seeing the motor turning in his mind, every part clear and precise. He found a stick and began drawing diagrams in the dirt of the park path, explaining in a rush of words how it would work, how the phases would create the rotating field, how the rotor would follow the field's rotation without any mechanical connection. For weeks afterward, Tesla refined the design in his mind, testing different configurations, different winding patterns, different rotor designs. He didn't need to build a prototype. His mental laboratory was sufficient. He knew it would work. He had solved the problem that Professor Poeschel had declared impossible, and he knew with absolute certainty that this invention could change the world. Now he faced a new challenge, turning his vision into reality and convincing the world that alternating current was the future of electrical power. This would require resources, workshops, backers, and allies. It would require leaving Europe for a land where innovation was celebrated and fortunes could be made on good ideas. It would require going to America. Chapter 3: The New World. In 1884, at the age of 28, Nikola Tesla boarded a steamship bound for New York with 4 cents in his pocket, a book of his own poetry, calculations for his alternating current motor, and a letter of introduction. The letter was from Charles Batchelor, a mutual acquaintance who worked for Thomas Edison, addressed to Edison himself. Its contents, according to legend, were brief and powerful. My dear Edison, I know 2 great men, and you are one of them. The other is this young man. Tesla arrived in America with almost nothing, but he arrived with purpose. The crossing had been eventful. His money and baggage were stolen, leaving him with only the clothes on his back and the papers he had guarded zealously. On his first night in New York, nearly penniless, he repaired a broken motor for a shop owner and earned enough for a meal and a room. Even in dire straits, his skills commanded value. When Tesla presented himself at Edison's office, the contrast between the 2 men could hardly have been more stark. Edison, already famous and wealthy, was a practical tinkerer who believed in direct current, in incremental improvements through endless experimentation, in protecting his business interests zealously. Tesla was a theoretical visionary who thought in terms of alternating current, who solved problems through mental calculation rather than physical trial and error, and who cared little for business. Yet Edison hired Tesla on the spot, recognizing his technical brilliance even if he didn't understand or appreciate his methods. Tesla threw himself into improving Edison's direct current generators and systems, working with the same obsessive intensity he had shown in school. He redesigned motors, improved efficiency, and solved problems that had vexed Edison's other engineers. He worked 18-hour days, demonstrating a work ethic that even the notoriously demanding Edison respected. The relationship, however, was doomed from the start. Their fundamental disagreement about the future of electrical power was irreconcilable. Edison had invested his fortune and reputation in direct current systems. Direct current had limitations. It couldn't be transmitted over long distances efficiently. It required thick, expensive copper wires, and it needed a power plant every few miles. But Edison had built an empire on it, and he wasn't about to abandon that empire for an unproven alternative. Tesla, conversely, knew that alternating current could be transmitted over vast distances using transformers to step the voltage up for transmission and then back down for use. It was more efficient, more economical, and more practical for electrifying entire cities, entire nations. He tried to convince Edison, but his boss dismissed the idea with a comment that would become famous. "Tesla, you don't understand our American humor." The breaking point came over money. Edison had allegedly promised Tesla $50,000 if he could improve the efficiency of Edison's DC generators. Tesla accomplished the task brilliantly, creating designs that saved the Edison company substantial sums. When he asked for the promised payment, Edison laughed it off. "Tesla, you don't understand our American humor," he said again. Whether the promise had been serious or the whole thing a misunderstanding, Tesla felt betrayed. Tesla quit. He walked away from the most famous inventor in America, from a secure position with good pay, from the only substantial employment he had found in the New World. It was a decision born of pride and principle, and it plunged him into the darkest period of his life. For the next year, Tesla struggled to survive in New York. The investors he approached with his alternating current ideas dismissed him. They had heard Edison's pronouncements that AC was dangerous and impractical. Why should they bet against the wizard of Menlo Park? Tesla's funds evaporated. He took work as a ditch digger for $2 a day, wielding a shovel on the streets of New York, the same streets where he had once envisioned building a new electrical infrastructure. The irony was bitter. Here was a man who had solved one of the great technical challenges of the age, whose mind contained designs for motors and generators that would revolutionize the world, digging ditches. He slept in boarding houses when he had the money and in flop houses when he didn't. His health, always fragile, deteriorated under the physical labor and poor nutrition. His visions became more frequent and disturbing. But Tesla never stopped working on his ideas. At night, by candlelight in whatever room he could afford, he refined his designs, made calculations, and prepared for the day when someone would give him the chance to prove himself. He knew his inventions were valuable. He knew they would work. He just needed someone with vision and resources to believe in him. That someone appeared in the form of Alfred S. Brown, a superintendent at Western Union, and Charles F. Peck, a lawyer from Englewood, New Jersey. The foreman of the ditch-digging crew where Tesla worked, seeing potential in the educated immigrant, introduced him to these men. Tesla, given a chance to present his ideas, spoke with passionate intensity about alternating current, about rotating magnetic fields, about the future of electrical power. Brown and Peck saw what others had missed. They recognized that Tesla wasn't just another inventor with a wild idea. He was a man who had solved a fundamental problem that the entire electrical industry was grappling with. They agreed to fund the development of working prototypes in exchange for a share of the patents. In 1887, the Tesla Electric Company was formed, and Tesla was given a laboratory on Liberty Street in Manhattan. Finally, after years of struggle, Tesla could build what he had been seeing in his mind. With proper workshop facilities and skilled assistants, he constructed his first alternating current motors. The moment when the motor spun into life, powered by alternating current with no commutator, no brushes, just the elegant rotation of magnetic fields, must have been profoundly satisfying. Professor Puschel had been wrong. The impossible was possible. Tesla filed for patents on his AC motor and related systems. The patents were granted in 1888, a portfolio of intellectual property that described a complete system for generating, transmitting, and using alternating current power. These patents would become some of the most important in electrical engineering history. In May 1888, Tesla was invited to lecture before the American Institute of Electrical Engineers. His presentation, "A New System of Alternate Current Motors and Transformers," was a triumph. He demonstrated his motors, explained the principle of the rotating magnetic field, and laid out a vision for how AC could power the modern world. The audience, composed of the leading electrical engineers in America, was impressed. One man in the audience was particularly interested: George Westinghouse, the wealthy industrialist who had made his fortune with the air brake for trains and was now entering the electrical business. Westinghouse had been developing AC systems himself and recognized immediately that Tesla's motors solved the great remaining problem of alternating current power. There had been no efficient AC motor before Tesla's invention. Westinghouse approached Tesla with an offer. He wanted to license Tesla's patents and use them as the foundation for a complete AC power system that would compete with Edison's DC empire. The offer was generous: $60,000 in cash, stock in the Westinghouse company, and a royalty of $2.50 for every horsepower of electrical power generated using Tesla's patents. Tesla accepted. It was a deal that should have made him one of the wealthiest men in America. But more important to Tesla than the money was the validation. His inventions would be built. His vision would be realized. Alternating current would get its chance to prove itself against direct current. The war was about to begin. Chapter 4: The War of Currents. The battle between alternating current and direct current for dominance in the American electrical system became known as the War of Currents, and it was waged with a ferocity that shocked even an age accustomed to bare-knuckled business competition. On one side stood Thomas Edison, the most famous inventor in the world, defending his DC empire. On the other stood George Westinghouse, backed by Tesla's patents and the technical superiority of alternating current. Edison's strategy was to attack AC as dangerous, deadly, and unsuitable for home use. He launched a public campaign emphasizing the higher voltages used in AC transmission, ignoring the fact that transformers could step down the voltage safely at the point of use. Edison even coined a new term: to be Westinghoused meant to be electrocuted. The campaign grew darker. Edison's representatives held public demonstrations where they electrocuted animals with AC power to demonstrate its lethal nature. Dogs and cats were killed in front of crowds. In a particularly notorious incident, they electrocuted Topsy, an elephant that had killed 3 men, using AC power before a crowd of 1,500 people at Coney Island. The message was clear: alternating current was a killer. Edison even worked behind the scenes to ensure that when New York State sought a more humane method of execution than hanging, the electric chair used alternating current. He wanted AC associated with death in the public mind. The first execution by electric chair of William Kemmler in 1890 was botched and gruesome, requiring multiple jolts of power. The newspapers reported the horror in detail, exactly as Edison had hoped. Tesla, watching this character assassination of his invention, burned with frustration. He knew that AC was no more inherently dangerous than DC at comparable voltages. The safety issue was a red herring, a distraction from the real technical and economic advantages of alternating current. But how could he prove it to a public being fed a steady diet of fear by the most trusted inventor in America? His response was characteristically dramatic. Tesla began giving public demonstrations of his own, designed to show that AC could be handled safely when properly understood and implemented. In his laboratory, before audiences of journalists, scientists, and society figures, Tesla would allow hundreds of thousands of volts of high-frequency alternating current to pass through his body. The demonstrations were spectacular. Tesla would stand on a platform, his body completing a circuit carrying enough voltage to kill a man many times over, while electrical discharges would stream from his hands. He would light wireless lamps by holding them in the electrical field surrounding his body. He would create artificial lightning in his laboratory, bolts of electricity arcing through the air, while he stood calmly in the midst of it all, unharmed. The secret lay in the frequency of the current. Tesla had discovered that at very high frequencies, alternating current would flow over the surface of the skin rather than through the body, a phenomenon now known as the skin effect. By using high-frequency AC, he could safely conduct experiments that looked impossibly dangerous. To audiences unfamiliar with the physics, it appeared he had tamed electricity itself, making him seem almost superhuman. These demonstrations made Tesla famous in his own right, no longer just the man behind Westinghouse's patents, but a public figure, a showman scientist who could make electricity dance to his will. The press loved him. He was exotic, brilliant, and provided excellent copy with his predictions about the future of electrical technology. While Tesla performed his electrical ballets, Westinghouse fought the business war. He built AC power plants, bid aggressively for contracts, and improved his systems constantly using Tesla's patents as the foundation. The economic advantages of AC became impossible to ignore. A DC system required a power plant every mile or so to serve a city. An AC system could have a single plant serving an entire metropolitan area. The savings were enormous. The decisive battle came in 1893 with two major projects: the contract to light the world's Columbian Exposition in Chicago and the contract to build the first major hydroelectric plant at Niagara Falls. Both would determine the future of electrical power in America and, by extension, the world. The Chicago World's Fair was to be the greatest exhibition of modernity ever assembled, showcasing the achievements of the 19th century and the promise of the 20th. The contract to illuminate the fair was a prize of immense symbolic and practical value. Edison's General Electric Company and Westinghouse's company both submitted bids. Westinghouse underbid General Electric by $1 million, an enormous sum, taking a loss on the contract because he understood what was truly at stake. If Westinghouse could light the fair with AC power safely and brilliantly, it would be proof positive that alternating current was the future. The contract was awarded to Westinghouse. On May 1st, 1893, President Grover Cleveland pushed a button that sent power surging through Tesla's AC system to 100,000 incandescent lamps that illuminated the White City, as the fair's grounds were called. The effect was magical. Visitors who had never seen electric light on such a scale were overwhelmed. The fair became known as the Electric Fair, and Westinghouse had Tesla's system to thank for it. Tesla himself attended the fair, demonstrating his inventions in the Westinghouse Pavilion. He showed his rotating magnetic field motors, his high-frequency coils, and his wireless lighting. He was a sensation. Crowds pressed in to see the wizard who could conjure light from the air. For Tesla, it was vindication. The world was seeing what he had known all along. Alternating current was superior. The second great prize was Niagara Falls. The Niagara Falls Power Company was planning the first major hydroelectric plant, harnessing the tremendous power of the falls to generate electricity for transmission to Buffalo, over 20 miles away. The question was whether to use AC or DC. A DC system couldn't transmit power that far efficiently. Only AC could do it. After extensive study and consultation with the world's leading electrical engineers, the Niagara Falls Commission chose Tesla's polyphase AC system for the project. It was the final definitive victory in the war of currents. Westinghouse would build the generators based on Tesla's patents. When the system went online in 1896, transmitting power from Niagara Falls to Buffalo, it proved that long-distance electrical transmission was practical, economical, and revolutionary. The world took notice. Cities across America and Europe began adopting AC power systems. Edison's DC empire crumbled. General Electric, Edison's own company, began manufacturing AC equipment. Edison himself, though he never admitted defeat publicly, privately acknowledged that the battle was over. Alternating current had won. For Tesla, the triumph should have brought wealth beyond measure. The royalty agreement with Westinghouse, $2.50 per horsepower, should have generated millions upon millions of dollars as AC systems spread across the country. But there was a problem. The royalty payments were crushing Westinghouse financially. His backers demanded he renegotiate or face bankruptcy. Westinghouse came to Tesla and explained the situation. Without relief from the royalty payments, the Westinghouse company would fail and all the work they had done together would be for nothing. Tesla faced a choice: hold Westinghouse to the contract and risk destroying the company that had championed his inventions, or give up the royalties and settle for the original cash payment in stock. Tesla tore up the contract. He walked away from a fortune that would have made him one of the richest men in the world. When asked about it later, he said simply that Westinghouse had believed in him when others didn't, and he wouldn't be the cause of his friend's ruin. It was a decision of almost incomprehensible generosity, or depending on one's perspective, naivety about the value of money. The war of currents was over. Tesla had won the technical battle but forfeited the financial victory. He was famous, respected, and celebrated as one of the great inventors of the age, but the fortune that should have secured his future for all time was gone, sacrificed to loyalty and principle. He would spend the rest of his life chasing new visions, new inventions, always needing new backers, always one breakthrough away from the prosperity that kept eluding him. Chapter 5: The Tesla Coil and Wireless Dreams. With the war of currents won and his finances secured, at least temporarily, by the Westinghouse settlement, Tesla turned his attention to new frontiers. His mind was already racing ahead of the technology of his time, envisioning a world where electricity could be transmitted without wires, where information could be sent across vast distances instantly, where the very air itself could become a conductor for power and communication. In 1891, Tesla developed one of his most famous inventions, though it would take decades for the world to fully appreciate its significance: the Tesla coil. This device, a type of resonant transformer circuit, could produce extremely high voltages at high frequencies. In Tesla's hands, it became a tool for exploring the properties of electricity that no one had properly investigated before. The Tesla coil demonstrations became legendary. In a darkened room, Tesla would activate his coil and electrical streamers would leap through the air, crackling and hissing, creating displays of artificial lightning that left audiences gasping. He would hold fluorescent tubes that would glow brilliantly without any wired connection, lit by the electromagnetic field generated by the coil. He seemed to have moved beyond merely controlling electricity to actually partnering with it, understanding it at a level that approached the mystical. But for Tesla, these demonstrations were not mere showmanship. They were experiments, investigations into the nature of high-frequency electrical phenomena. He was discovering that electrical energy could resonate, could be tuned like a musical instrument, and could be transmitted through space without conductors. These discoveries pointed towards something revolutionary: wireless transmission of both information and power. Tesla became convinced that he could develop a system to transmit electrical power through the Earth and the atmosphere, eliminating the need for the copper wires that crisscrossed cities and limited the reach of electrical grids. He envisioned a world where power could be drawn from the air itself anywhere on the planet, freely available to all humanity. It was a vision of almost utopian grandeur, and it would consume much of his remaining career. In 1893, Tesla began lecturing extensively on his wireless ideas. He spoke before the National Electric Light Association, the Franklin Institute, and scientific societies in London and Paris. His presentations combined rigorous technical explanations with stunning visual demonstrations. He showed wireless lighting, radio-controlled boats, and early forms of what would later be recognized as the principles of radar and remote control. The scientific establishment was divided in its response. Some recognized the genius in Tesla's work and saw the potential for revolutionary applications. Others dismissed him as a dreamer, too caught up in spectacular effects to do practical work. Tesla himself didn't help his case by making grand predictions that seemed to stretch credibility, talking about communicating with other planets, about drawing unlimited energy from the environment, about transforming the entire planet into a resonating electrical system. In 1895, disaster struck. Fire destroyed Tesla's laboratory on Fifth Avenue, consuming years of research, irreplaceable equipment, and countless experiments in progress. Tesla was devastated. He had lost not just the physical apparatus, but also many unique prototypes and notes that existed nowhere else. His mental ability to visualize and remember helped him reconstruct some of the work, but much was gone forever. Yet Tesla rebuilt. With financial backing from Edward Dean Adams and the Niagara Falls Power Company, he established a new and larger laboratory on Houston Street. The new facility was designed specifically for his wireless research, with more powerful equipment and better facilities for high-voltage experiments. Tesla threw himself back into his work with renewed intensity. It was during this period that Tesla also began his investigations into X-rays, working independently and simultaneously with Wilhelm Röntgen's discovery. Tesla produced X-ray images that were sharper and clearer than Röntgen's early work, though he never pursued formal credit for the discovery. He was more interested in understanding the phenomenon and exploring its applications than in priority disputes. Tesla's work with high-frequency currents and his X-ray experiments took a toll on his health. He suffered burns from electrical discharges and was exposed to radiation before anyone understood the dangers. His nervous system, already sensitive, became more reactive. He developed an obsessive-compulsive need for cleanliness, a phobia of germs, and a rigid adherence to certain behaviors and rituals that brought him comfort and a sense of control. Despite these difficulties, the late 1890s were among Tesla's most productive years. He developed the fundamentals of radio transmission, creating the basic circuits and principles that would later be used by Marconi and others. He patented a remote control system that he demonstrated with a radio-controlled boat at Madison Square Garden, stunning audiences who couldn't comprehend how a vessel could move without visible means of control. Tesla's vision of wireless power transmission became more specific and ambitious. he proposed building a worldwide system of towers that would transmit both power and information. The Earth itself would be the conductor, he theorized, resonating at specific frequencies that his transmitters would excite. Any receiver tuned to the right frequency could draw power from this global grid anywhere on the planet. To test his theories on a larger scale, Tesla needed space and freedom from the restrictions of working in New York City. He also needed powerful backers who would fund what promised to be very expensive experiments. In 1899, he found both in an unlikely location, Colorado Springs, a small city at the foot of the Rocky Mountains, far from the electrical infrastructure of the East Coast. Leonard Curtis, a lawyer and supporter of Tesla's work, offered him free land and electrical power in Colorado Springs. The local power company, eager for the prestige of hosting the famous inventor, agreed to supply electricity for his experiments. Tesla accepted, seeing an opportunity to build a massive experimental station where he could test his wireless power transmission theories without interference or limitation. In May 1899, Tesla arrived in Colorado Springs and began constructing a laboratory unlike any the world had seen. At its center was a massive Tesla coil, a structure 50 feet across with a 200-foot mast extending from its center. When activated, this apparatus could generate electrical discharges of millions of volts, creating artificial lightning bolts over 100 feet long, the largest man-made electrical discharges ever produced. For nearly 9 months, Tesla conducted experiments in Colorado Springs, pushing the boundaries of electrical science. He claimed to have transmitted electrical energy through the earth, lighting lamps miles away without any wire connection. He detected what he believed were electrical signals from space, possibly from Mars, though these were more likely natural atmospheric phenomena. He filled notebook after notebook with observations, calculations, and theories. The residents of Colorado Springs had mixed feelings about their famous visitor. When Tesla activated his apparatus at full power, horses would bolt, sparks would jump from metal objects, and sometimes the entire city would go dark as Tesla's experiments overloaded the local power station. He was doing things with electricity that no one had imagined possible, and it was both thrilling and terrifying to witness. Tesla returned to New York in January 1900, convinced he had proven the viability of wireless power transmission. He had demonstrated, to his own satisfaction at least, that electrical energy could be transmitted through the earth and received at distant points. Now he needed to build a full-scale system that would make his vision a reality. He needed a patron with deep pockets and faith in grand visions. He found one in J.P. Morgan, the most powerful financier in America. Chapter 6. Wardenclyffe Tower and the Dream's Collapse. In December 1900, Tesla approached J.P. Morgan with a proposal for a world system of wireless communications. He outlined a plan to build a transmitting station that could send messages across the Atlantic, competing with Marconi's radio telegraph system. Morgan, seeing commercial potential in global communications, agreed to invest. He provided Tesla with $150,000 and 200 acres of land on Long Island to build what Tesla called his Wardenclyffe facility. What Tesla didn't fully reveal to Morgan was that wireless communication was only part of his vision for Wardenclyffe. Tesla intended to build a worldwide wireless power transmission system, fulfilling the dreams he had been pursuing since his Colorado Springs experiments. The massive tower he designed for Wardenclyffe was meant to transmit both messages and electrical power, freely available to anyone with the proper receiving equipment. anywhere on Earth. Construction began on Wardenclyffe in 1901. The centerpiece was a massive tower, 187 feet tall, topped with a 68-foot diameter dome. Beneath the tower, Tesla designed a complex of underground tunnels and shafts extending 120 feet into the Earth, designed to tap into what he believed were the Earth's natural electrical resonances. The facility was to be the first of many such towers that would grid the globe, making electrical power as freely available as air. But almost immediately, problems emerged. The costs of construction exceeded Tesla's estimates. The technology required was more complex than anticipated, and most critically, the commercial justification for the project began to crumble. In December 1901, Guglielmo Marconi successfully transmitted a radio signal across the Atlantic Ocean, beating Tesla to the achievement that was supposed to secure Morgan's investment. Tesla desperately wrote to Morgan asking for additional funding, revealing more of his true intentions for Wardenclyffe. He explained the wireless power transmission vision, the global energy grid, the dream of free power for all. Morgan's response was chilling in its brevity. "I have received your letter and in reply would say that I should not feel disposed at present to make any further advances." The reasons for Morgan's refusal were practical and telling. How could anyone make money from a system that transmitted power freely through the air? How could it be metered? How could access be controlled? Morgan was a businessman, and he understood that Tesla's grand vision, however noble or technically brilliant, had no business model. Wireless communication could be sold as a service. Free wireless power could not. Tesla tried other investors, other backers, anyone who might see the value in his work. He wrote passionate letters explaining the benefits to humanity, the transformation of civilization that would follow universal access to electrical power. But investors wanted returns, not revolutions. The money didn't come. Construction at Wardenclyffe slowed, then stopped. The tower stood incomplete, a monument to ambition that exceeded both technical capacity and commercial viability. The years following the Wardenclyffe collapse were difficult for Tesla. His money ran out, his debts mounted. He lived in increasingly modest circumstances, moving from the elegant hotels where he had maintained suites to smaller, cheaper accommodations. The man who had dined with the Astors and Vanderbilts now struggled to pay his bills. Tesla continued to work on inventions, filing patents for improvements to turbines, for new types of electrical devices, for variations on his wireless transmission systems. But his grand projects languished. Without funding, he couldn't build the large-scale demonstrations that might have convinced skeptics. And without demonstrations, he couldn't attract the funding he needed. He was trapped in a cycle of unfulfilled potential. In 1905, overwhelmed by debt and facing the failure of his greatest project, Tesla suffered what appears to have been a nervous breakdown. He withdrew from society for a period, struggling with depression and anxiety. The mental afflictions that had troubled him all his life intensified. His obsessive-compulsive behaviors became more pronounced. He developed an overwhelming fear of germs and a compulsion to perform certain actions in sets of 3. His appearance began to change as well. Always impeccably dressed in his younger years, Tesla now wore the same formal attire long past its prime, unable or unwilling to afford new clothing. His tall, thin frame became gaunt, but his mind remained sharp, even as circumstances reduced his ability to apply it. He continued to envision inventions, to calculate, to dream of what might be built if only the resources could be found. In 1906, Tesla's 50th birthday, some of his old friends and admirers arranged a celebration in his honor at the Hotel Waldorf Astoria. The event brought together scientists, engineers, and society figures who still remembered his contributions to electrical engineering. They gave speeches praising his genius and his achievements. Tesla, moved by the recognition, gave a speech of his own, looking back on his life's work and forward to a future he still believed would vindicate his visions. But after the celebration, reality intruded. In 1908, unable to pay the mountain debts associated with Wardenclyffe, Tesla was forced to sign over the deed to the property to satisfy his creditors. The tower that was to have brought free energy to the world stood abandoned. In 1917, during World War I, the U.S. government would order it demolished, fearing it might be used as a landmark for German submarines. The tower was dynamited, collapsing into rubble. The destruction of Wardenclyffe Tower marked the end of Tesla's grand, ambitious projects. He would never again have the resources to pursue such sweeping visions. At 51 years old, the most productive phase of his life was behind him. Ahead lay decades of survival, of smaller projects, of living on the diminishing returns of past achievements, and of watching the world adopt technologies he had pioneered while he himself was increasingly forgotten. Yet Tesla never stopped believing in his vision of wireless power transmission. He continued to write about it, to lecture when invited, to explain to anyone who would listen how it could work, how it would transform civilization, how future generations would eventually build what his generation lacked the resources or the will to construct. He had seen too far ahead, dreamed too large, and underestimated how difficult it would be to turn visions into reality without the commercial incentives that drove most technological development. Chapter 7. The Declining Years. As Tesla entered his 60s, his circumstances became increasingly precarious. The royalties from his alternating current patents had long since been forfeited. His savings were depleted by the Wardenclyffe project. He survived on a combination of small consulting fees, occasional awards, and the generosity of friends and former colleagues who remembered his contributions to electrical engineering. Tesla maintained a public presence, giving interviews to newspapers and magazines, making pronouncements about the future of technology, and occasionally demonstrating his remaining inventions. The press still found him good copy, this eccentric genius who claimed to have invented death rays, to be in communication with other planets, and to have discovered secrets about the fundamental nature of the universe that others had missed. Some of his claims became increasingly grandiose and difficult to verify. He spoke of having developed a teleforce weapon, a directed energy device that could shoot down aircraft from 250 miles away and would make warfare obsolete by making defense so effective that no nation would dare attack another. He offered this invention to the U.S. military, but when asked for demonstrations or detailed plans, he had neither. The claims remained just that, claims. Tesla's daily routine became rigid and ritualistic. He stayed at a series of New York hotels, running up debts and then moving to a new hotel when his credit was exhausted. Hotel managers often forgave his debts, either out of respect for his past achievements or to avoid the publicity of evicting the famous inventor. He would walk to a particular set of restaurants for his meals, always ordering the same dishes, always leaving precise tips calculated to specific amounts. His obsessive-compulsive behaviors intensified. He couldn't tolerate touching anything round. He had to have exactly 18 napkins at his place when he dined. He counted his steps as he walked and felt compelled to circle a block 3 times before entering a building. These compulsions, once manageable eccentricities, became consuming rituals that governed his daily life. Tesla developed a deep affection for pigeons, spending much of his time feeding them in city parks. He had particular favorites among the birds and could identify individuals. He would sometimes bring injured pigeons to his hotel room to nurse them back to health. In one famous incident, he became particularly attached to a white pigeon with gray markings on its wings. He later claimed this bird was special to him, that they had a connection beyond the ordinary relationship between human and animal. When this particular pigeon died, Tesla was devastated. He claimed that in its final moments, a brilliant light emanated from the bird's eyes, a light more intense than anything he had seen in his electrical experiments. Whether this was real, hallucinated, or metaphorical, Tesla experienced it as profound loss. He wrote that with the pigeon's death, his life's work was finished. Yet he continued working, at least in his mind. Without laboratory facilities or funding for experiments, Tesla conducted his research theoretically, filling notebooks with calculations and designs for inventions he could no longer build. He developed ideas for vertical takeoff aircraft, for improved turbine designs, for new electrical circuits. Some of these ideas were prescient, anticipating technologies that would be developed decades later. Others were products of a brilliant mind no longer properly grounded by the discipline of experimental verification. On his 75th birthday in 1931, Time magazine put Tesla on its cover, celebrating him as one of the great inventors of the electrical age. The magazine article praised his contributions to the development of alternating current and acknowledged his other innovations in radio, motors, and high-frequency electricity. It was a moment of recognition for a man who had felt increasingly forgotten by a world that had moved on without him. Tesla gave an interview for the occasion, looking back on his life and forward to what he still hoped to achieve. He spoke of his wireless power transmission dreams, still confident that future generations would build what his own time had not. He predicted developments in television, in aviation, in energy generation. Many of his predictions would prove remarkably accurate, though he would not live to see them realized. As the 1930s progressed, Tesla's health declined. He had been hit by a taxi in 1937, suffering several broken ribs and a back injury. He refused medical treatment beyond the bare minimum, relying on his own theories about health and healing. The injury never properly healed, and it limited his mobility further. He became more reclusive, venturing out less frequently, spending more time alone in his hotel room with his calculations and his memories. Financial support came from an unexpected source. In 1934, the Westinghouse Company began paying Tesla $125 per month as a consulting fee, though everyone understood it was actually a pension, a way to support the aging inventor who had made the company's fortune possible. Other companies and individuals contributed as well. Tesla's pride made accepting this charity difficult, but necessity forced him to take what was offered. Despite his reduced circumstances, Tesla maintained his dignity and his conviction in the value of his work. When reporters would ask about his financial situation, he would deflect, talking instead about his current research, his theories, his vision for the future. He refused to be pitied, insisting that his contributions to human progress were worth more than any fortune he might have accumulated. He kept working until the very end, his mind active even as his body failed. In his final years, he developed theories about cosmic rays, about the nature of gravity, about the fundamental forces of the universe. These theories, never published in scientific journals or subjected to peer review, represented Tesla's last attempts to understand the deep mysteries of nature that had fascinated him all his life. On January 7, 1943, Tesla died alone in room 3327 of the Hotel New Yorker. He was 86 years old. A maid found his body the next morning. The official cause of death was coronary thrombosis, a blood clot to the heart. He had left instructions that he wanted a simple funeral with no embalming, honoring his lifelong obsession with cleanliness and his wish to return to nature as quickly as possible. Chapter 8: Legacy and Vindication. News of Tesla's death made headlines around the world. The New York Times published a lengthy obituary praising him as one of the outstanding intellects of the world who paved the way for many of the technological developments of modern times. The Yugoslav government offered to pay for a state funeral. Messages of condolence arrived from scientists, engineers, and political leaders who recognized what Tesla had accomplished. Yet even in death, controversy surrounded Tesla. Immediately after his body was discovered, representatives from the U.S. government arrived at his hotel room and seized all his papers, notebooks, and personal effects. This was January 1943, in the midst of World War II, and American intelligence agencies were concerned about Tesla's claims of death ray weapons and other potentially powerful military technologies falling into enemy hands. The FBI assigned the task of reviewing Tesla's papers to John G. Trump, a professor of electrical engineering at MIT and an expert in high-voltage phenomena. After thorough examination, Trump concluded that Tesla's remaining papers contained no workable designs for weapons or other devices of immediate military value. Most were either highly theoretical or dealt with work Tesla had done decades earlier. The death ray and other spectacular claims had been just that, claims without substance. Tesla's funeral was held at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City on January 12, 1943. 2,000 people attended, a mixture of scientists, engineers, former colleagues, and admirers. Nobel Prize winners spoke in tribute. The Yugoslav ambassador gave a moving eulogy, claiming Tesla as a son of Yugoslavia, even though he had spent most of his adult life in America. Tesla, who had never married and had no close family in the United States, was mourned by a community that recognized too late how much it owed him. His body was cremated as he had wished, and his ashes were placed in a golden sphere, later housed in the Tesla Museum in Belgrade. This museum, established in his honor, would eventually hold many of his personal effects, his awards and medals, and reconstructions of his most famous inventions. It became a place of pilgrimage for engineers and scientists who wanted to understand the man who had seen so far into the future. In the decades following his death, Tesla's reputation underwent a remarkable transformation. During his lifetime, particularly in his later years, he had been seen as an eccentric has-been, someone who had made important contributions in the 1890s, but had then descended into impractical speculation and grandiose claims. But as technology advanced and the world caught up with his visions, people began to reassess his legacy. The controversy over who invented radio was finally settled in Tesla's favor, at least legally. In 1943, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that Tesla's radio patents predated Marconi's work and that Marconi's patents were therefore invalid. This vindication came too late for Tesla to enjoy, but it corrected the historical record. Tesla had indeed been first with the fundamental principles of radio transmission, even if Marconi had been more successful at commercializing the technology. Tesla's work on remote control and robotics, which had seemed like mere showmanship in the 1890s, was recognized as pioneering when guided missiles and remote-controlled devices became crucial military technologies in World War II and beyond. His demonstrations of radio-controlled boats were essentially the first drones, controlled by what we would now call radio frequency signals. He had seen the potential of autonomous machines decades before anyone else. His vision of wireless power transmission, which had bankrupted him and been dismissed as impossible, began to seem less far-fetched as scientists developed a better understanding of electromagnetic waves and energy transfer. While we still don't transmit large amounts of power wirelessly over great distances as Tesla envisioned, technologies like wireless charging for phones and electric vehicles, RFID tags, and wireless power for medical implants all trace their conceptual lineage back to Tesla's work. The Tesla coil, once seen primarily as a demonstration device, became an essential tool in radio and television broadcasting. The principles Tesla discovered about high-frequency electrical phenomena found applications in medical equipment, in industrial processes, in scientific research. Every magnetic resonance imaging machine, every radio transmitter, every piece of equipment that uses high-frequency electrical circuits owes something to Tesla's investigations. But perhaps Tesla's greatest vindication has been the worldwide adoption of alternating current as the standard for electrical power generation and distribution. The system Tesla invented and Westinghouse championed became the global infrastructure for electricity. Every time someone flips a light switch, charges a device, or uses an electric appliance, they are benefiting from Tesla's vision of how electrical power should work. The world runs on AC, just as Tesla knew it should. In the 21st century, Tesla's name has experienced a remarkable revival. Electric car manufacturer Tesla Motors, now Tesla Inc., adopted his name to honor his pioneering work in electrical engineering and his vision of a future powered by clean, efficient electricity. The international unit of magnetic flux density is called the Tesla, ensuring his name appears in scientific papers and textbooks worldwide. Numerous books, films, and documentaries have explored his life, sometimes verging into myth-making, but always acknowledging his genuine brilliance. Modern assessments of Tesla recognize both his extraordinary achievements and his very real limitations. He was a visionary inventor who could see decades into the future, but also a poor businessman who gave away fortunes and made impractical promises. He was a rigorous scientist who could calculate complex electromagnetic phenomena in his head, but also a man prone to wild speculation and unfounded claims. He was a generous spirit who believed technology should serve all humanity, but also a bitter competitor who fought viciously over patent disputes and priority claims. Tesla died in debt and relative obscurity, his greatest projects incomplete, his grandest visions unrealized. But he left behind a legacy of inventions and ideas that transformed the world. The alternating current system powers our civilization. The principles of radio enable our communications. The concepts of remote control and automation shape our technology. And the dream of wireless power transmission, though not yet fully realized, continues to inspire researchers who believe that what Tesla couldn't quite achieve might still be possible. Perhaps the most fitting tribute to Tesla is simply this: we live in the world he imagined. when he described a future of instant global communications, of machines that could think and act independently, of electrical power flowing efficiently to every corner of the globe, of information transmitted through the air. He was describing our present. He couldn't build it all himself. No one person could. But he saw it when others couldn't, believed in it when others didn't, and contributed essential pieces to its realization. The child born in a thunderstorm, who nearly died of cholera, who came to America with nothing, who stood in his laboratory amid artificial lightning of his own creation, dreaming of a future he would never fully see, that child changed the world. Not perfectly, not completely, not in exactly the ways he intended, but profoundly, permanently, and for the better. That is Nikola Tesla's legacy, and it endures in every electric motor that hums, every wireless signal that crosses the air, every light that drives back the darkness of night. The story of Nikola Tesla is a reminder that genius alone is not enough, that vision without execution is incomplete, that the future arrives at its own pace regardless of how clearly we can see it. But it's also a reminder that one person, armed with brilliant ideas and unstoppable determination, can shift the course of human history. Tesla did that, and in doing so, he became not just an inventor, but a symbol of the power of human imagination to transform the world. As you drift into sleep, let this story resonate in your thoughts. A man who could see invisible forces, who dared to harness lightning, who dreamed of a world illuminated and connected by electrical power flowing freely through the air. A man who gave away fortunes to stay true to his principles, who worked until the end in pursuit of understanding, who believed that humanity's future was brighter than its past. Nikola Tesla saw tomorrow and a help to build it, one invention at a time. His light still shines in every electrical current that flows, in every wireless signal that connects us, in every dream of what technology might yet achieve. Rest well, knowing that the vision of this remarkable man continues to illuminate our world.